Before this video ends, you're going to know exactly why federal investigators sealed what they found inside Annie's car, what that sealed report signals about where this investigation stands right now, and what the complete wall of silence around that vehicle tells us about who knows what in this case. But first, I need you to sit with something. Nancy Guthrie woke up on January 31st the same way she had woken up 10,000 times before. She was 84 years old. A pacemaker keeping her heart beating. A home she had lived in since 1985 wrapped around her like the only world she needed. Her son-in-law, Tommaso, drove her back that evening, watched her go inside between 9:30 and 9:50, and left. 4 hours later, she was gone. Not confused, not wandered off. Gone, deliberately, carefully, by someone who had been watching long before that front door opened. The FBI deployed 400 agents. The tip line pulled in over 55,000 calls. The reward climbed to $200,000. 2 separate DNA profiles came back from the evidence. The country watched and waited. And then investigators took Annie's car. They processed it. They documented what they found. And they sealed that report so completely that weeks into the most scrutinized missing persons investigation in recent American history, not one word of what was inside that vehicle has reached the public. Not a category, not a summary, not a single confirmation. That silence is not accidental. It is a choice. A deliberate, strategic, legally considered choice made by people who understand exactly what they have and what releasing it could cost them. And that choice is what this video is about. Before we go any further, if you have been following Nancy Guthrie's case and you are not subscribed to this channel yet, do that right now. Because here is the truth. Somewhere out there, a family is sitting in a house that feels completely different from the one it used to be. There is a chair at a table that nobody sits in anymore. There is a voice that nobody hears anymore. There is a woman who was loved. Genuinely, deeply loved, who has not been home in 6 weeks. And the only thing standing between where this investigation is right now and the moment her family finally gets answers is information. Information that someone watching this video might have. Information that this channel exists to surface, to analyze, and to keep in front of the people who need to hear it. If you leave this page without subscribing, you might miss the update that matters most. You might miss the moment this case breaks. Hit subscribe. Turn on every notification. Do it for a family that is still waiting. Most coverage keeps asking the same question about Annie's car. Did investigators find something connecting Tommaso directly to the night Nancy disappeared? That is a legitimate question, but it is an incomplete one. The sharper question is this: why has what they found remained sealed? And what does federal evidence protocol tell us about what that secrecy means? Because the answer to the first question is binary. Yes or no. But the answer to the second question is structural. It tells you something true about this investigation regardless of what specifically was in that car. Here is the thesis. The secrecy around Annie's car is not a gap in this story. It is the story. What investigators protect tells you as much about the direction of a federal case as what they reveal, sometimes more. Now let us build the framework that makes the analysis possible. There are 3 specific reasons federal investigators seal forensic findings. Every single one applies here. The first is investigative integrity. When federal agents are actively building a case, releasing forensic findings tell suspects and their lawyers exactly what the government knows and exactly what it does not. Each piece of evidence represents a gap in someone's defense. The moment it goes public, attorneys begin building the wall around it. Sealed evidence is not a bureaucratic delay. It is prosecutors saying, "We are not finished yet. Hold that against what we know." The FBI released the doorbell footage. They released the physical description. They confirmed the 2 DNA profiles. Each release served a specific purpose. The footage generated tips. The description narrowed focus. The DNA confirmation applied pressure. Every release was a tool, Annie's car evidence was not released, which means investigators made the strategic decision that it serves this case better protected than public. The second reason is grand jury proceedings. Federal law is specific. Evidence presented to a grand jury cannot be publicly disclosed. A sealed forensic report maintained under seal across weeks of extraordinary media scrutiny is one of the clearest procedural signals that grand jury proceedings may be underway. A grand jury is not a trial. Then it is the process by which federal prosecutors determine whether sufficient evidence exists to bring formal charges. It operates in secret. And when it is running, the evidence feeding it goes dark by law, not by choice. This investigation has been federal from day one. The 400 agents, the forensic labs, the genealogy work on 2 DNA profiles. Federal kidnapping investigations at this threshold move toward grand juries. That is the procedural architecture of this type of case. The third reason carries the most weight here. Victim safety. Nancy has not been found. She is 84 years old with a pacemaker. This is not a cold case, it is a live one. Every piece of sealed evidence is a piece of evidence that cannot be used by whoever has her to make a decision about what to do next. Sealed evidence in a case with a living victim is not frustrating procedure. It is the people trying to bring her home doing their jobs. Any one of those 3 reasons alone justifies the seal. All 3 together tell you that what investigators found in Annie's car is not peripheral to this case. It is central to it. Now you need to understand what investigators were actually looking for when they processed that vehicle, because you cannot assess the significance of sealed findings without knowing the framework they fit into. Federal agents processing a vehicle in a live kidnapping case work through 4 specific evidence categories. The first is biological evidence, DNA, hair, blood, skin cells. This is the category with the highest evidentiary weight in any case, and it carries a particular weight here because this investigation is already defined by DNA. 2 separate profiles have been recovered. One from a nitrile glove found 2 miles from Nancy's home. One from inside the house itself. Investigators walked into that vehicle processing with those 2 known profiles already in hand. They were not searching blindly. They were searching for a match. The second is digital evidence. GPS history, paired phone data, toll records. Digital evidence from a vehicle cannot be explained away with an alibi built after the fact. It is a record of where that vehicle was, at what time, and sometimes who was inside it. Tommaso dropped Nancy off between 9:30 and 9:50. The suspect appeared on her doorbell camera hours later. Annie's car has a GPS history that covers that entire window. If it moved during those hours, that movement is recorded. If it did not move, that is recorded too. Either answer is information. Either answer is something investigators would want to protect. The third is trace evidence. Fibers, soil, particulate matter transferred between a vehicle and another location. Nancy lived in that house for 40 years. A home occupied for 4 decades accumulates a specific material signature. Particular dust, particular fibers, particular desert soil from the Catalina foothills. If Nancy was transported in Annie's car at any point after she disappeared, that signature transfers. Trace evidence is extraordinarily difficult to fully eliminate. The fourth is physical evidence and the evidence of absence. Items that should not be there. Items conspicuously missing, and evidence of cleaning or sanitization inconsistent with normal use. Sanitization evidence carries a specific weight in criminal investigations because the effort to remove evidence is itself evidence. It establishes that whoever cleaned that vehicle knew there was something in it that needed to go. Federal investigators do not process a vehicle, seal the findings, and hold that seal through weeks of the most intense media scrutiny this case has generated without a reason, proportionate to that effort. The question is not whether they found something. The question is which of these 4 categories it falls into. Now, anchor the car in the timeline. Tommaso dropped Nancy off between 9:30 and 9:50 on the evening of January 31st. That is the last confirmed contact before the suspect appeared on her doorbell camera. What happened in the hours between that drop-off and that appearance is the central unanswered question of this entire investigation. Annie's car was in someone's possession during that window. Its GPS history records where it was. Its surfaces hold whatever biological and trace material was present when federal agents opened the door. What matters is not just that the car was processed. It is that the car was processed, and the findings were protected. That gap between processing and protection is where the significance lives. There is a pattern in this investigation that most coverage has walked right past. It is not hidden, it is sitting in plain sight. The FBI released the doorbell footage. They released the physical description. They confirmed the DNA. They raised the reward to $200,000 and deployed 400 agents publicly enough that the number became part of the story. Every release was a deliberate strategic decision made by people who knew exactly what it would do. The footage generated tips. The DNA confirmation told whoever did this that the government had their biological material and was running it. The reward told the people around whoever did this that their loyalty had a price. Annie's car evidence has not been released. Not a category. Not a summary. Nothing. In a case where the FBI showed the country the face of a masked suspect on a doorbell camera, choosing to say nothing about what was inside that vehicle is the loudest strategic decision this investigation has made. Loud, strategic choices in federal kidnapping cases are made for one reason. What is being protected is more valuable sealed than public. That hierarchy tells you everything. The doorbell footage was valuable enough to release. The DNA was valuable enough to release. The car evidence is valuable enough to keep sealed above all of them. What investigators found in Annie's car occupies a different category of significance than everything else that has come out of this case. It is not circumstantial color. It is something federal prosecutors have decided they cannot expose before they are ready. In federal investigations, there is a specific term for evidence that carries this weight. Load-bearing. Evidence is load-bearing when the direction of the entire case depends on it. When releasing it prematurely could compromise not just one angle but the structural integrity of the prosecution being built. Annie's car evidence has been sealed across the entire arc of the most publicly scrutinized phase of this investigation. That duration is intentional. And intentional protection of load-bearing evidence in a live federal kidnapping case means one thing consistently across the history of federal prosecutions. Investigators know where this is going. They are protecting the road that gets them there. Now let us talk about where that road leads. To understand what the car evidence means, you have to hold it against what the DNA already established. 2 separate profiles, 2 separate locations, 2 people. A planner who knew the house, the cameras, the schedule, the outer gate, and an operative who physically crossed that threshold in the dark and carried out what the planner had built. A vehicle is one of the very few places in a criminal investigation where the activity of both a planner and an operative can leave traces at the same time in the same space. If that vehicle was used to transport Nancy after she was removed from her home, the evidence profile would include biological material from her person, trace evidence from her home, and GPS data covering the route. That connects the car to the execution of the crime. If it was used during the planning phase, the GPS history would show the neighborhood in the days before January 31st. Physical materials connected to preparation. That connect the car to the architecture of the crime before it happened. And if that vehicle contains evidence of more than one person's presence, it becomes the connective tissue between the 2 roles. And the single piece of evidence that bridges the planner and the operative inside one contained space. That is the scenario with the highest evidentiary weight. That is the scenario that would most completely explain why investigators have protected these findings with the consistency they have. Now, the detail that almost no one covering this case has examined carefully enough. Annie's car was not taken into federal custody as a routine step in a broad evidence sweep. The timing of when it was taken, the agency that took it, and the reported circumstances surrounding its custody all point to a vehicle that had been identified as significant before it was processed, not after. In federal investigations, vehicles are sometimes processed as a precaution because they are accessible and might yield something. And vehicles are sometimes processed because investigators already have specific reason to believe that vehicle holds something they need. The reported circumstances of Annie's car fall into the second category. Investigators were not casting a wide net. They were reaching for something specific, and knowing where to reach in a kidnapping investigation means having information that points in a direction, evidence that led them to that vehicle with purpose rather than procedure. Hold that against what the DNA evidence is doing right now in a laboratory in Florida. 2 profiles, both being run through investigative genetic genealogy, the same methodology that identified the Golden State Killer after decades, the same approach used in the Brian Kohberger case. This methodology does not require a direct database match to produce a name, nor it requires a relative, a cousin who took an ancestry test out of curiosity, a parent who wanted to know their ethnic background. Any branch on either family tree that intersects with a commercial DNA database creates a trail. Those databases now hold hundreds of millions of profiles across 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, MyHeritage, and Family Tree DNA. The probability that both individuals whose DNA was recovered at this scene have 0 family members in any of those databases approaches 0 and shrinks with every passing week. The genealogy labs do not need a direct match, they need a thread, with 2 profiles running simultaneously, potentially corroborated by whatever biological material was recovered from Annie's car. The threads available to investigators are not shrinking. They are multiplying. 1 DNA profile is hard to run from. 2 narrows the window of anonymity to something with a clear and documented endpoint. That endpoint is a name. Now look at the silence. Not the general silence around this case, but the specific, targeted silence around Annie's car. In the weeks since this became the most covered missing persons case in the country, statements have been made. Lawyers have spoken. Family representatives have addressed the doorbell footage, the DNA, the tip line, the reward, the family's cooperation with investigators. Annie's car has not been addressed, not by the family, not by legal representatives, not by anyone in a position to speak with knowledge about what was inside that vehicle. That is not general silence. That is a targeted silence around one specific piece of evidence. And targeted silence of that precision does not happen by accident. And it happens when the people who know what that report contains have been told clearly and directly not to acknowledge it. Legal counsel advises silence. That is standard practice, and no reasonable person faults anyone for following that advice in a case of this magnitude. But consider the shape of what we are looking at. Every significant piece of evidence in this case has drawn some form of public response except one. Complete silence from every direction, simultaneously around the single piece of evidence that federal investigators processed and sealed above everything else. That is not the natural shape of innocent people navigating a painful situation. That is the shape of people who have been told this specific subject is the one they cannot touch. Here is where this lands. Oh, no law enforcement agency has publicly named a suspect in this case. Everything in this video has been drawn from public records, confirmed reporting, federal procedural framework, and analytical inference built on established facts. That standard has been maintained throughout. What this video has established is the following. The 3 reasons federal evidence goes dark, investigative integrity, grand jury proceedings, and victim safety, all apply to Annie's car simultaneously, and that simultaneous application is not routine. The 4 evidence categories investigators work through when processing a vehicle each carry specific implications here, and the Category, with the highest evidentiary weight, connects directly to the 2 DNA profiles already confirmed in this case. The pattern of releases versus protections in this investigation places Annie's car in a category of significance above everything else that has come out publicly. And the targeted silence around that vehicle from every direction at once is consistent with exactly one thing: people who know what that report contains and have been carefully instructed not to let that knowledge show. When the car evidence becomes public, and in federal investigations of this scale it will, here is specifically what to watch for: which evidence category the findings fall into, whether the biological material matches either of the 2 known DNA profiles, and whether the digital evidence covers the GPS window between 9:50 in the evening and 2 o'clock in the morning on the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Those 3 data points will tell you more about where this case is heading than anything else short of an arrest. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. She has been missing since February 1st. She spent 40 years building a life in that house, and she deserves to come home to it. If you know anything, the FBI tip line is open, and the reward is $200,000. Drop your answer in the comments right now. Based on the 4 evidence categories, which one do you believe investigators found in Annie's car, and why is that sealed report being protected above everything else in this case? Subscribe and turn on notifications. The moment the car evidence becomes part of the public record, this channel will be the first place that analysis lives. Because Nancy Guthrie is not a news cycle. She is an 84-year-old woman who went to bed on January 31st in the home she loved. And she deserves every mind working on this until she comes home.